Oh, Mexico. It sounds so simple. All right. Welcome to another Friday live edition of Cannabis Chat, the Green Rush Show with David Rabinovitz and yours truly, Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Thank you so much for joining us here on Friday. David, how are you doing today?
I'm having a fine day, Jimmy. It's been a very interesting week, and I know we've got a lot of news to share, and I've got a couple of tidbits as well, but go ahead.
I like tidbits. It's a very interesting week in the world of cannabis in so many ways. Not sure you heard the news, but Mexico, the country of Mexico, has paved the way for a medical marijuana program to be rolled out, and they're also going to be rolled out and Mexican cannabis and rolled out and Mexican cannabis and rolled out and deal when you think about Canada to the north, Mexico to the south, and the United States in the middle. That can't hurt the cannabis reform movement, right?
I don't think so, Jimmy, but if I'm not mistaken, I think Mexico has been exporting cannabis for a lot of decades.
Both legally and illegally, is that what you're saying?
Sure.
Well,
we should get George Jung on the show one of these days. He can tell us how it was done.
Absolutely. And do you know what's going on in South Dakota by any chance?
I know that the governor is now suing to overturn the will of the voters. That's always a fascinating conundrum to me. People elect you to do a job, and then you say, and then the people tell you, and here's what we want you to do. And you say, I don't think I want to do that.
That's exactly right. And those are the two biggest stories that we have in We Talk News, which is our weekly news program that Ry Russell and I co-anchor. And we'll be doing that right after this live stream up till 6 o'clock Eastern time. So the other thing that we like to do here on this live show is we've opened up chat rooms. I believe, David, you're on the Twitch channel. I'm on the YouTube channel. I think one of our staffers, if you will, is on the Facebook channel. So we've got multiple channels going on right now. If you want to chat with us, ask us any questions. But getting back to the South Dakota situation, we had Melissa Metley, who was in charge of the medical question in South Dakota, on with us before the election and even after the election as well. And that question got 70% approval in South Dakota. The adult use question only got 54%. But the last time I checked, David, and you're the numbers guy, 54% is more than half, right?
Usually, Jimmy, usually. But when you're dealing with politicians, they've got some interesting ways of doing the math.
Definitely. And we really don't know what's going to happen with that. But she is trying to go after the fact that this was the ballot question drove a state constitutional amendment. And that's how a lot of legal states have actually had their programs accepted in their states. But in South Dakota, obviously now she's trying to change the Constitution through the courts. And I'm going to guess that a judge is not going to see it that way. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the people have spoken in South Dakota, and I think that nobody's had any success in turning around voter initiatives in the U.S., at least not permanently. So,
well, we certainly know what. That's been in the news a lot lately, let's just say, okay, yep. At another level and a different election, if you will. But the other thing that happened, interestingly enough, in the news, have you ever been to Amsterdam, David?
I have not, Jimmy.
Is it on the bucket list?
It is not on the bucket list.
Well, it's on my bucket list, okay? Let's just say the Netherlands, first of all, great soccer coming out of the Netherlands over the years, let's just say. But they also have the toleration. So we were talking last week on this show about decriminalization versus legalization. Well, in the Netherlands, it's been toleration. And even though it's illegal to actually grow cannabis, they're actually allowing you to share it and sell it at these cafes, and have been doing that now for decades. In fact, the Netherlands, I believe, gets 47 or 49 million tourists to come visit them every year. The mayor of Amsterdam now is trying to limit the amount of coffee houses that are allowing cannabis to be served on their menu. And that has caused a little bit of a controversy, as you can imagine.
Right. I think some of it, though, Jimmy, is the mayor feels that there's a lot of drug tourists who don't have a lot of money who are coming through. And that's from what I've read, that's what they're really trying to limit.
Well, I think that any time that you have, it's been part of the culture and the part of the scene there for a long time. And while as a politician, the mayor would like to have people come to her city to view the tulips or whatever else they check out in the Netherlands. But the point is, she'd like it not to be known as a place to go to get weed, but also to come and just see the beautiful sights that are in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam in particular. I'm not quite sure where that's what's going to happen with that. But let's talk a little bit about this show, David, and let's set the scene, if we will, about who you have coming on. First of all, we're going to be talking about social equity on this program, correct?
Today, Jimmy, we're going to hopefully take a bit of a medium dive, maybe not a deep dive, but a nice medium dive about some of the social equity programs across the country.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
No, I was going to say the reason why I get excited about these kinds of shows is when people are out there talking about cannabis and reform of cannabis, the expungement of records of those who have been most impacted on the failed war on drugs always comes up. In fact, in state legislations now, state legislators all over the world, all over the country anyway, are looking to do right by the people that have been incarcerated for cannabis possession crimes, sometimes for years and years and years. And now that the plant is becoming more accepted and certainly recognized with medicinal benefits, they being those that are in power, are looking for ways to give those people an opportunity to get into the business now that it's legalized. Here in Massachusetts, it was part of the question and part of the law now. And I'm not quite sure if I was giving a grade on Massachusetts social equity programs, David, I think I'd give them maybe, I don't know, a C+. What do you think?
Yeah, but Jimmy, I think that I would agree with you. Probably a C up until recently. I think Massachusetts is doing a great job with their commitment to social equity and their desire to basically pivot and get really breathe life into the program with what they've done with home delivery. Home delivery is going to be huge, and it's reserved specifically for social equity applicants for the first 3 years. So I think that's a big deal.
Do you like the fact now that cannabis has really become almost not so much a drug issue, because I look at it as a plant, but also now as a race issue, as an and that's really what changed Bruce Barcott, who's the editor of Leafly, wrote a great book called Weed the People. If you haven't read it, I recommend it really as highly as I possibly can, because he was in the trenches for both Colorado and Washington State when they went through their whole legalization process. And he was enlightened by a friend of his who worked for the ACLU, who explained to Bruce that this is not a drug issue anymore. This is truly a race issue. And if you look at the fact that there have been still over 500,000 arrests for cannabis possession crimes in 2019 in the United States of America, there's an issue here. And needless to say, the private business that is our prison system. Can you explain to me a little bit about why the prisons are a private business enterprise?
I think that comes down to, Jimmy, when the government decides that it's too expensive to run it, and they don't want all the variable cost and they don't want all the aggravation, then they parcel those things out to industry to run it for them.
Okay.
The problem is the government tends not to worry about if they take a loss. Industry, that's a big problem. So then you have let's say a private prison company, and if they own the facility, they need to keep the facility full, right? There was a not related anything to cannabis, but do you remember a few years ago, a couple of judges in Pennsylvania had financial interest in youth detention facilities?
I
That
don't.
was a huge story. So these two judges end up, they've got a private, quiet interest in youth detention facilities, and youthful offenders would come before them, and they would all be sentenced to time within these facilities. One of them spent a fair amount of time in jail as a result of it, right? That's one of the problems that you have when you have that kind of conflict comes up.
And of course, if you're looking at it from a law enforcement perspective, they were just doing their jobs. However, they racially profiled, and our jails are filled with persons of color. And it just doesn't make any sense to me now that they can actually target people of color who might be carrying a couple of joints, and it changes their lives immediately if they get busted. So, this is definitely part of the national platform that the Democrats have been looking at now. They have control of all three parts of the government, except for the judicial part, but they definitely have the White House, they have the House, they have the Senate now. One wonders how quickly we're going to move on that. Last week, we talked to Michael Correa, who is one of the lead lobbyists for the NCIA. And he, a lot of people are saying it could be 2 years, it could be even longer, but we don't know how long it will take just to make a little reform. And that could be as simple as an administrative phone call from the executive branch to the Department of Justice to deschedule cannabis. And to me, that little act, that simple phone call, would just go such a long way in so many avenues of business and also social justice. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And there are certainly some exceptions out there. And we're going to talk to some people out there who have entered into the cannabis space. And we know, David, that it sometimes takes a lot of capital to do that. What about access to capital for those who have been most impacted on the war on drugs? It's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a challenge. And there was an interesting Facebook post somebody sent to me this past week. And now that I've gotten more into the cannabis sector and I'm dealing more with social equity type issues, there was a lesson in it. So the post was a friend of mine and myself when we were about 15 years old. We grew up in an apartment HUD financed apartment complex, and there was a parade coming through town. We went out, scrounged our money together, bought a few cases of soda, and using the plastic tray that the 24-pack comes in,
yeah,
we fashioned up like ropes around our waist, and when we were selling soda, right? Two young kids, 15, 16 years old. Maybe we made $10 that day. I don't know how much it was. It was many, many decades ago. But what struck me about it was we didn't have any sort of permit, any sort of license. A couple of industrious kids, right? Now imagine you're an industrious kid in a different kind of a neighborhood, and you know that somebody's got some marijuana plants, and you know that the item that you can sell easily is weed, right? What's the difference between a couple of kids who were doing that and what we were doing, right? We didn't have permits. We were hawking sodas. They don't have permits. Is it really that big of a difference? And then when you look at the way people are treated as a result of it and the impact, right? It can hamstring someone. You get arrested, now you may not be able to get into the military if that's a route you want to go. So I happen to think there's a lot that the government needs to do. I'm a big believer in, at this point, I'd legalize everything from prostitution to drugs to pot. Just legalize it all, because it's all going to end up legal at some point. If you look at history, we have a Puritan-based society.
Right.
So everything's restricted until there's enough pressure, and then it becomes unrestricted. Maybe just legalize it all right now, put the regulations in place, and let people do what they want to do.
I agree 100%. There is a factor of money, however, that's involved with all politics and also humans. Everybody wants a piece of the action, if you will, no matter what that action happens to be. And I believe that's where the negotiation begins, the leverage, who has the leverage to move this forward, who's got the most in the game, what have you. Look, we know it's going to be really interesting, and I love having the opportunity to talk about it. I do want to say, speaking of talk, I've already got a really good chat going on here on our YouTube channel. I'm not going to give him the second name, but I'm going to say John gave us a little history about the endocannabinoid system, which if you don't know what that is, let me explain. John explains it perfectly, so I'm just going to read it. And I'm much happier reading stuff than I am talking about it. He goes, we didn't really discover the endocannabinoid system until 1992. Yes, it's in throughout our bodies. It controls the neuroreceptors, our CB1 and our CB2 neurological receptors. And sure enough, this plant has 100 phytocannabinoids. These are big words, but I actually understand them. And this is the interaction between the cannabis plant and our endocannabinoid system. And that's what really balances our stressors, our pain, our immune system, all this stuff in all mammals, I might add. It's another reason why you see a market emerging, CBD for pets.
Oh,
David,
yeah.
you have a pet, don't you?
We have 3 of them, Jimmy.
You have 3 pets. Are they all dogs?
Yes.
Have any of the dogs have any issues? Because we know that dogs.
Well, actually, I'm not going to bore everybody, but in total, there's 5. There's only 3 here now, and one of them gets CBD regularly.
Yeah, there you go. It's amazing. Now, I also understand there's another side to that THC can be very, very dangerous for dogs. So it's very important that whatever CBD you feed to your pet, I would think you'd want to make sure that it was from a tested facility or a reliable farmer. Where'd you go? Where'd David go? I looked up, he's not even there. Is he still? Where'd you go?
There we go, Jim.
Oh, your eyes. Oh, look
David
at
Watson,
that.
say hello.
Look at that face. What's the name of the dog?
Dr. Watson.
Dr. Watson. Of course. Elementary, for sure. I get it. It's too bad your virtual background keeps keying out, but that's okay. We got the picture of the dog in there, and that's a adorable little thing. So anyway, we encourage people to chat with us. If you come up with a good comment, we'll use it just like I did from John here on our YouTube channel, and we can talk about it more. David, before we take our 4:20 break or get set up for it, let's run down who we're going to be talking to between 4:25 and 6 p.m. Eastern today, because again, it's quite a lineup. You want to run it down? I'm
gonna run it down, Jimmy. I'm just not sure I'm gonna do okay with all the names. But
okay, so I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna take a hit at Marie.
You're gonna take Marie, and I'll do
Montmarquet.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
Svint Mykel, our friend Rico, right? Our friend Rico Lamitte from Canivision.
With us in the past.
Right, Rico from Canivision. But tell us a little bit, if you can, about Marie, because she's really interesting. She's a great little story for social equity and also social justice and equity in our industry. Tell us a little bit about her.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'd be glad to.
It's right here on the sheet that you put together. Do you want me to read it?
I got the sheet right here.
Okay, go ahead.
So anyway, Marie is the co-founder of MD Numbers in California. She's also very involved and very much a social equity advocate. She's an advisor to the Cannabis Equity Program for Success Centers and offers monthly tours to MD farms for equity applicants.
I believe that she has a vertical, as they say in the business, basically controlling seed to sale of the cannabis plant. So
Marie has her hands, she's got her thumbs in a lot of pies, but she's going to be a really interesting guest. Svint Mykel, I met him at, I think it was the NCIA show in Boston. I was on a panel with Andrea Cabral. We were talking about the challenges of getting local approval up here in Massachusetts, these things called host community agreements. And he came up to me after the show. We've had a great conversation. I kept his card. And this past week, when we were thinking about what we were going to do for this show, it took me about 20 minutes to find it, but I sure found it. We're thrilled to have him join us. Rico Lamitte out of LA. He's been on with us in the past. He's always a very entertaining guest and always has a lot of good insight. And then when we get to 5 o'clock, we've got a really good cast coming on. We have Grant Ellis-Smith.
No, not Grant Ellis-Smith again.
Yeah, but listen, very quiet. Okay. It's Grant's birthday.
I know that, actually. I saw it on Facebook and already wished him a happy birthday. But
And
don't tell anybody.
Grant is now the president of MassCan. The elections were this past week.
Oh, that's great.
So, yep. Amanda Vinicky, she's a correspondent and segment host, so she's a real pro. She's on Chicago Tonight on WTTV in Chicago, covers cannabis, and she's always on the hunt for stories, and we were on the hunt for her, and we got her to join us.
Great.
And Portia Mittons, who's the co-chair of Minority Access Committee and the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois. So we've got the West Coast, we've got Illinois, we've got New York. I love
that. It's cannabis coast to coast.
Right.
I love but that's not all, as they say in this business, right?
What's that?
Do we have Jesse coming on too?
I believe we have Jesse. We're having a couple of issues in getting in touch with him this afternoon, but hopefully he's going to join us. He's going to be very entertaining. I've read a couple of his interviews. This is a young man at the age of 26, decided he was going to get into business in California and has, I believe, 3 dispensary licenses out there. And he knows his stuff.
There you go. Well, speaking of stuff,
he's actually a really interesting study, right? This is a young man who, to make money, he was industrious, and he and his buddy started selling weed when they were teenagers, right?
You learn about supply and demand very quickly, don't you?
Right. But when it became legal, he decided he would make the jump. So
that's great.
And again, it goes back to these tensions that I think we're all becoming more aware of in some neighborhoods, you may go out and mow lawns. In other neighborhoods, you do other things to make money. Does it mean that the people are bad? I don't think so, right? If they've got that entrepreneurial drive and they're trying to get ahead, like everybody else in America, whether it's kids or adults, it's just they went down a route that it's the norm. And if you're in a neighborhood where everybody's smoking pot for relaxation, then you're going to try to hustle some pot. If you're in a neighborhood where everybody's smoking, where everybody's drinking beer, maybe you're going to see if you can buy a 24-pack and sell the singles. I mean, you can't, it's hard. It's one thing when the police bust a 57 and 60-year-old guy from Brooklyn who've rented a house in Western Massachusetts, and they're growing weed all through the house, and it's becoming a fire hazard. But it's a lot different when somebody's trying to make a buck and get ahead without causing damage to society, but they get swept up. And that's about on the restorative justice front. That's why we need expungement. And we need programs like what we have here in Massachusetts with the social equity program and the home delivery license class. It'll get people into business.
And that's the class that you and Beth run, right?
I wouldn't say run, but we teach. Yeah, we're one of the instructor sets. Yes.
There you go. The instructors. All right. It is now 4:20 on a Friday afternoon, and it allows us to take our first break on the show. It allows me to talk a little bit about the Waldos and how the whole 420 thing got started in the cannabis world. Just in case you didn't know, it was 1971. A bunch of high schoolers from San Rafael, California, used to meet at 20 past 4 at the Louis Pasteur statue that was situated across the street from the high school. They decided that would be the time for them to catch a little buzz. Needless to say, law enforcement being as sharp as they are, they realized there was a pattern going on here. So they adopted the 420 call as public consumption of cannabis going on at the corner of Main and Vine, or whatever street they happen to be on. And that's how the cannabis culture decided to embrace 420 as a code. They celebrate April 20th. We celebrate it a little differently here on Pro Cannabis Media because back in the day, 1971, for instance, there was a singer-songwriter from New England. His name was Jonathan Edwards. He had a tune that every time we heard it on the radio, Shanty was the name, we would partake, let's just say. So in honor of 420 on the East Coast, we play Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. When we come back, we'll get into our social equity discussion. Don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 1900. I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean, I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the
Hey.
Green Nurse Podcast.
Woo!
We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
All right, welcome back to Cannabis Chat Live on the Pro Cannabis Media channel and social media networks out there. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. I'm joined by David Rabinovitz, and this is the Green Rush. This is the business of cannabis. And on this particular day, we are going to talk about the social equity initiative in the industry. We've got a couple of guests already in the room with us. Marie Montmarquet is with us. She is the co-founder of MD Numbers in California. And he's known in New York as a former communications director of NORML, but he's now coming to us from Orlando, Florida, and he is Svint Mykel. So Svint Mykel and Marie, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, indeed.
And David, I'm going to let you take it from
Great.
here.
So, listen, why don't we start with, I want to give each one of you a moment or two, just give an introduction, tell people what you're about, that sort of thing. Ladies first. Marie, why don't we start with you?
For sure. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Marie Montmarquet. I'm in California and San Francisco right now. My brother and I have been out here for about 10 years building compliant cannabis companies, started in delivery and then moved into cultivation and delivery, distribution, processing, a little bit of everything that vertically integrates our farm and our delivery and our distro. So just been on the ground, learning a lot, really involved in operations on a lot of different levels, and then been getting really involved in advocacy the last 2 years. I work with Success Centers, which is the #1 institution helping equity in San Francisco. And I do a lot of just pro bono help and advisory with their nonprofit.
Cool. Very good. Okay, Svint Mykel, you're up.
Oh, absolutely. So my name is Svint Mykel. I am owner of Supreme Green Cuisine and a former communications director of New York City NORML, the New York City chapter. What we do with Supreme Green Cuisine is we cater to educating people about cannabis and microdosing cannabis, understanding the molecules within cannabis from THC to CBN. And of course, we do CBD because that's the new crave and the new rave of it all, which is really great because having that piece of cannabis comfortable to discuss and comfortable to be around has really give us an opportunity, a platform to educate people. And then, of course, NORML, we have been lobbying since the beginning for cannabis to make sure that it has a true voice and a great narrative. So, in a nutshell, I'm really big on the community and big on people knowing what they're consuming.
I'm all about knowing what I'm consuming on a regular basis, let's just say. David, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Rico Lamitte just joined us. Rico, come back on camera, and we're just running through with an introduction of the speakers. If you want to take a moment and introduce
Awesome.
yourself.
There he is.
Hey.
How you
Rico.
guys doing? There's a terrible accident. I'm close to my office in Orange County right now. There's like a terrible accident. I've just been sitting in the lovely, beautiful weather we have out here.
Why is everybody rubbing that in?
That's a rub.
Hey, Rico, I just showed him the pool, man.
Rico, tell us a little bit about Canivision. What's going on? And by the way, Svint Mykel knows Vladimir from Happy Monkey, who was on your show.
Yeah.
I think it was last week.
Yeah, he was actually on our first broadcast that we did. They are partners with ours out on the East Coast. And Canivision, we're a decentralized media broadcast organization based out here in LA, but we are all over the place. Like literally, we have broadcast hubs in the Northeast, Midwest, Southeast, Canada, Mexico as well. And what we do is we are counter news. You can kind of think of us like I don't like comparing us to everybody else, but we're sort of like a Vice News of the cannabis industry. And when stuff happens in the industry, these big news stories, like wherever, we reach out to the people who were affected, positively, negatively, it doesn't matter, on the opposite side of that. And we counter those stories, giving people a more well-rounded version of what's going on in the world's most opaque industry. And we're having a lot of fun doing it, man. we're helping a lot of small businesses. Number one, we're unearthing a lot of truths that help everybody. Doesn't matter how big your company is, how small your company is. When you only get one side of the story, which is the deep-pocketed people right now, who are getting the articles and Benzinga, Green Market Report, and like all of that stuff, then everybody suffers from that. Whether you are an investor, whether you are a consumer, whether you are a operator, doesn't matter, because you're only getting one side of the story. So I've been in the industry on both sides, both the legal and illegal side of the industry, and once out of necessity, now out of choice, helped 2 companies go public. And I see a lot of pain and I see a lot of triumph right now. And the problem is people are not connecting and sharing information. So that's what we do. We get people access to stories that other people just don't, for some reason, they're not told, they're not coaxed into believing that these stories have value. And we go directly to the community and we show them that they do have value. So everybody eats, everybody has better information. And at the end of the day, everybody flourishes from that information too. So we had a 3-month rollout, 3 live broadcasts that we did. And we are officially out of beta on January 20th. And we have a Winnebago out in your neck of the woods, Jimmy, leaving Connecticut, making its way down to the inauguration. Unfortunately, we had a small event last week that where our Winnebago, the Cannabis, will not be able to be at the inauguration. So we're getting to a couple of high-profile interviews with politicians that are in the cannabis industry or cannabis industry adjacent, and just getting their take on what's going on, from the MORE Act to the Senate bill that came right after that. And we're getting a lot of really, really good feedback from everybody involved, and informing people where other people are just like drawing straws.
Right. Well, we'll be informing people with our Weed Talk news that follows this live stream, just so you know, because we do wave the right flag, as it were, Rico. Okay. David, you want to dictate where we go with the conversation next? Go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. Rico, you're hanging with us, or you got to run into your office?
No, I'm just gonna set up right on top of my car right here out in the.
Okay, cool.
I'm hanging with you guys. I told Isabel that I'm going to be on regardless. But there's a pretty bad pile up right outside our exit, so I'm just gonna be out here. I'm gonna put my computer up. I'm on. I'm good to go.
That's what happens when you put stoners behind the wheel. They start smashing.
It's not the stoners. It's not the stoners.
That's right. That's right.
We get in the slow lane. Put cruise control on.
Sure. Let me throw this out to the three of you. What does social equity mean to you? Like, what do you see as its goal, and what do you see as the most important aspect of social equity programs?
Ooh, who wants to tackle that first?
Go for it.
Marie, I bet you can handle that, Marie.
I think it's really, 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 really important. I mean, just the educational aspect of everyone understanding what social equity is. That's something that people have no clue. I was with a real estate agent the other day where I was just touring a property, and then we were briefly speaking on equity, and he's like, equity, I don't understand the whole equity thing. Why are we even doing that? And I'm like, remember the criminalization of cannabis that people have so suddenly forgotten about, and all those people that were criminalized by this plant, and the same people now are having no opportunity into taking one of the key things that, Black and brown people have been clearly put in jail for years and years and years, and not giving us a pathway to actually recreate our own business in a legal way. So I started just thinking, like, in San Francisco, for instance, it's not necessarily, he's like, well, if you went to jail for weed, why would they give you a business? That's kind of an oxymoron, right? And I'm like, how would that be an oxymoron if you're allowing the people that have been in jail participating in this plant, taking the risk all this time? So the moment that it's actually decriminalized, we're just going to give it to the rich and allow the rich get richer, and not even allow the people that look like me and, the rest of us to have an opportunity to exist in this capacity. So I think that number one, it's just like educating the masses on what equity is and why it exists and why we wouldn't just give this drug or this plant rather to straight corporate America, where we only thing that we know that America cares about is capitalism, and capitalism is money over people every single day. So at the end of like, for me, it's just a moment of like, what is social equity? Making sure that the people like me that have put our lives at risk to sell this drug when it was illegal have the opportunity to come into the legal environment and are empowered and supported to do so.
Cool.
Well said. Absolutely.
St. Michael, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I agree with everything that she's saying. I feel like, social equity for our communities, that, the lower income, the impoverished, the Black and brown are the ones that really have more of a relationship with cannabis, not only because of its disenfranchisement. So when we get caught with cannabis, we're not just taken to jail, we're abused. We're criminalized to such a depth that it's not a slap on the wrist to which it should be. So it kind of messes up our homes, and like having the opportunity to have not just equity behind it, but education, understanding behind it, not just for our own community, but starting core and giving it to the ones that don't know. Like, what Marie was saying is this man couldn't understand why equity was important. And just like Marie said, there's been so many of us that have been just ridiculed, abused, and ran through the mud. Like cannabis itself has had it's a campaign against it with Reefer Madness. So it's never really had a good voice behind it. And we, I believe, can give it its best voice because we're the most proficient in it. Somebody that's gone to prison for marijuana knows exactly what they're doing. They've had a practical application with it, more than someone who just knows the numbers. The smartest thing about community equity is taking those two staples and putting them together and completing something that can be successful. So you take a businessman, you educate a businessman, but they need to understand our structure, our history, so they have an appreciation, just like they appreciate money. Anybody who is skilled in business and in Wall Street and money has a certain passion behind it. They have a passion behind maybe a commodity that they're always following. And cannabis doesn't have a voice to educate them. So I believe, to not be so long-winded, that social equity would also bring a highlight of understanding, because we're able to explain, well, look, this is why we need this. And there's no coincidence why these impoverished people can't get these licenses, not only just the bias, but they don't have the capital for it. So and the reason why they don't have the capital for it is because they've been impeded on their entire experience with cannabis. So I agree 1,000%, and I just wanted to chime that in.
I want to ask the panel, and Rico, you're going to get first shot at this question, okay? In the United States of America, David and I were talking about this, that we have a privately run prison system. And we have this tendency when people break the law that you get consequences when you break the law and you get punished for that, as opposed to the European model that actually helps reform people who have made mistakes to get back onto their feet. It's a completely different way to look at the consequences for your action. So Rico, my question is, here's another example of how cannabis can have more of an impact than any other thing if we can change how we actually treat that prison system or those prisoners who do have this. Is this a way to change how we incarcerate the people that break the law? Go ahead, Rico.
That's a lot. Thanks, Jimmy. I think that, through cannabis, anybody who was, well, number one, they should free absolutely everybody that was arrested for any cannabis infractions, period. And I know there's an argument like, oh, you just like let people out. You upended these people's lives, period. And you threw them in jail. Figure it out. That's not our problem. You've ruined at the very least 3 generations of Black and brown communities' lives. And the Nixon tapes told us all, like the whole thing was targeted directly at us. So It's not our job to figure it out. It's not our problem that we created. Why are we continuously having to clean up other people's messes, right? I think cannabis opportunity should be open to prisoners first. All of those people who are incarcerated, the lowest level to the highest level, they should have first crack at being in the legal industry, period. You know, I'm a little more radical than the other panelists. I've been in, I guess on the legal side for 4.5 years. One of my mentors is Virgil Grant, who is the godfather of social equity. He actually was one of 10 pre-ICO owners that were rated by the DEA in 2010. And he was the only one of color that did any time. He did 6 years, one for each of his legal dispensaries that he owned. And he helped write the first social equity bill from his jail cell. It's like the Martin Luther King of cannabis. And he lost all 3 of his licenses. He doesn't even have any of his licenses right now. This happened all throughout the pandemic. So this whole thing that we're seeing right now during the pandemic is a huge corporate and government power grab. And I think it starts with the prison system, and it's for profit. It's total bullshit. It should be done away with. It is counterproductive. You're not reforming anybody. And what's going on in Europe, yes, like that is what rehabilitation is. Like, oh yeah, well, I believe, I don't know if it was on Vice or it was like an HBO documentary that I saw when they actually did a deep dive into the prisons over in Europe and what's going on over there. And like, they don't have ghettos targeted and cops actually baiting people to feed that system. They don't have quotas that they have to meet, right, and corporate shareholders of said prisons.
Right.
Like that, but that is America in a nutshell. And it really feeds into everything that happened last week. Like everything that happened last week, and why you have a bunch of people who look like us. We're sipping tea at home. Like, we got our guns as well. Like which one of y'all want to, like, this whole BS civil war? Like, this is white people against white people. This is this is the QAnon. Like, I'll say some radical shit. You know me, Jimmy.
I know. No.
QAnon is white barbershop. That's white barbershop talk. Like QAnon, like this, it goes out to the black barbershop. That conspiracy shit. Like, that's a QAnon. Like, which one of y'all wants to be Abraham Lincoln? Because we are broke as a people. Like, one of y'all wants to bring up reparations. Like, government has screwed us over too. We're not against y'all. Like, y'all are against each other. Like, right. We're over here trying to survive.
If I may chime in, I apologize.
Please. Go ahead,
please, brother.
And it seems to be this. It seems to be the same old song, you know. Like, just you just mentioned, like, look, reparations. Like, I've had so many ideas behind, like, why are we paying for college? Ever, okay? Ever, okay? And in fact, that would improve the country anyway, because more educated individuals, citizens, Americans, which is what matters constitutionally, then the more profit this country makes, the stronger we are, the chains link stronger. But we don't want strong links. We want, excuse me for saying, supreme links. We'll just call them supreme links. And I don't like to use the color too much. We want supreme links where we don't want these brown and black, although they can be efficient and they've shown us every time we've put them in a compromise, they've grown.
Yep.
From language, hip hop, everything that we've been taken away from us, we've developed into something great. Cannabis, like, okay, just personally for me, I'm a culinary artist. I had a second-degree burn on my hand. I infused cannabis honey. I was able to understand how to concentrate cannabis, to use silver sulfate and cannabis honey to make it go away. Do you see my hand? Like, that couldn't have happened if I didn't have time to work on that. And I'm from the illicit market as well. So I had a desire to do something specifically and bring this to a light. You know what I'm saying? We can't even enjoy medication properly with the stigma it has behind it. We're not going to enjoy it with big corporations throwing Coca-Cola weed out there. Nobody wants that. You know, like, nobody wants a Monsanto cannabis. You know,
but they're already here.
I know. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know, but we're the power.
But my take on that is there's only two ways to change the system. You got to change it from within, or you have to dismantle the whole damn thing. And however that plays out, like what are we going to do right now? If I'm not about it, I'm not about to go assassinate anybody. Like I don't think like many of us are about that life. Maybe some of these QAnon cats, I don't know, but we got to work with these people. And at the end of the day, capitalism, as it is right now, is run by corporations. Our country is run by corporations.
And the politicians are the ones that kind of tether us with them, and they're not well educated and they're hungry, so they get paid or they get incentivized to agree. And I had one lady from it was a district in Brooklyn in Crown Heights, and she was a straight no. I can't recall her name right now, but she was a straight no continuously. Like, no, this is going to mess up our neighborhood. I had to break it down to her on how important it is to take cannabis out of the darkness, out of our neighborhood, and educate our people so that we can grow as people. You know what I'm saying? Right. There's all the, fear and stress are killers. A bad thought won't get you anywhere. A positive thought might make you make a mistake, but at least you understand beyond that. And that's what we need to kind of do. We have to have positive perspectives behind this. And of course, we should be giving the professionals the position. If I may really briefly, because I was looking at different programs, because we don't have a program in New York, because, New York is crazy for now, because Jersey's right there.
A cannabis program or a social equity program?
A social equity program, like one that, go ahead.
I didn't chime in on that, but I think social equity is 40 acres and a mule, man. It's just a bunch of bullshit. And I know that is, I got booed off stage like 3 years ago for saying that, because people don't read the law.
Fine print.
Period. They get emotional, and just like you said, like emotional people are the easiest to sell a bunch of bullshit to, like straight up. And that's what social equity is. Social equity was created, I think, in 1968 by a white man in Idaho. It's such a broad term that you can't really define it, and it's easy to dismantle that and say, oh yeah, we checked off that box, we tried to help them, they couldn't help themselves. Like, no, there is no defined definition of it. And here where it started in California, there's no affirmative action. So it can never be about Black and brown communities, and you can never help those people at all.
Right.
And so the people are fighting over a bunch of shit that's going to fail.
Ohio was trying to make a social equity program that mandated 15% of licenses to racial minority. They wind up finding out that would be unconstitutional to do. Like it's a conundrum, man. Like because we have to approach it correctly.
It's the right thing to do, but it is unconstitutional in every damn state. And that's why you see every state, we're a little different, gonna do it differently. No, they're falling like dominoes. They try to follow other states and Illinois is gonna do it right. Chicago's doing the right thing. Chicago had 75 social equity licenses at large. 21 of them were actually claimed, and none of them went to people of color. And then they're like, oh, Detroit's gonna do it, and then everybody's mad because all the D-boys got it in Detroit, and they don't know anything on the business side of the industry.
I want to make sure. I want to get Marie's take on this too, guys.
Hop in, Marie. Let's go, please. I'm sorry.
I was just about to say that too. Like, hey, where's Marie?
I mean, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, so I have an interesting take on all of this stuff. I moved to California in 2010. I've been in jail for weed. My brother's been in jail for weed. My friends have been in jail for weed. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm super on the radical side. I'm super in the reality side. I can look outside every day and I can say shit's wrong. Look at this. Look at that. I mean, I don't. There's no conundrum of conspiracies here. It's blatant everyday things that I look at and I'm like, wrong, and people are okay with that. Wrong, and people are okay with that. Completely fucked up, and people are okay with that, right? So we've literally evolved into a society where we're completely okay being complicit to all of the illicit, messed up activities, whether it's political or, cannabis got so political so quick. I have a political science degree, and I never thought I was going to use it in cannabis, right? Like this, I just wanted to sell weed. I didn't want to become like some crazy advocate, but I realized, wait a minute, I looked around, I'm like, I'm one of the only Black people with a farm. I'm one of the only Black people with a successful business. I'm one of the only Black people out here that can actually advocate and say, I've went there, I've done that, I've spent millions of dollars, some in the right place, some in the wrong place. And I can just look around and say, almost like Rico said, like, we need help. Like, we need to help each other. And it's not even like we need help from the outside or any of the advertised things, but like literally we need to help each other. Like, and that's where we really need to start. And I think when you look at the facts, right, like we don't have access to capital, we don't have access to real estate. There will be no social equity program that is ever written in the world that if you do not give us some leg up on real estate, if you do not create some sort of tax incentives for different people that have real estate to give that real estate to us, kind of like the banking initiative acts, that there's actual reinvestment acts that we have written as our federal government has written, and we have done none of those. Of course, this is not federally legal, but that brings us to our next problem, where even the MORE Act literally just tried to do away with social equity programs, and people are so dumb, they didn't even read it. They didn't even realize, like, what are you talking about? You're not going to allow
exactly
to come onto the MORE Act talking about banking. Like,
everybody was so excited. Banking. They didn't leave the fine print.
No one cares about banking, bro. If you have $3,000, you can go and bank tomorrow. No one cares.
How about that part of the MORE Act when they said, not even if you had a prior felony, you can't apply, but if you were implicated in any felony. So if you were around, if you were associated with any felons, like technically they can like straight up like deny you of any ownership in this in this industry. Like,
and then go back to the question about rehabilitation in jail, right? You're like, okay, are we going to use cannabis to rehabilitate people? No, we're not. I can tell you that right now. Like, even the politics behind the groups that are freeing people is bullshit. There's smoke and mirrors in this industry. It's unreal. And people claiming work that other people
PR campaign, so to speak.
Oh God, yeah. It's like put on their back to take credit for the work that all of these people have done. I got pulled over in California a month ago, and the officer said to me, it smells like weed in your car a little bit. And in that moment, I was like, oh, yay, this still exists. Like, this all still exists. Even when they say this is not supposed to be something that can lead for the cop for probable cause to now search and seize. Like, search and seize is all they want. A conviction and a fine is all they want. And to keep you in that cycle. And once you have a felony, where are the programs that are leading people with felonies into rehabilitative jobs in cannabis? There's very few. Even expungement is a joke. There's not, if you want to expunge, you hit a button and you can expunge all these things. My attorney that had to expunge my conviction in Tennessee literally had to drive to Knoxville, Tennessee to file in person over and over again to continue to get my complete expungement done. I mean, it's 2021. Like, this is not, like, that's why I say, like, I'm not radical. The world is radical. Look outside. You look outside every day and you will see the most radical, unfair shit that you've ever seen in your life. And the question is, who cares? I think my biggest shtick is like, this is the stuff that I was complaining about, 2018, 2019. And then the George Floyd, protests and all these things came about and bubbled over. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you. Like, this has been completely obvious for all this time and no one's going to do anything about it because no one, like, literally, we are so fine with choosing money over people every day. And cannabis is the same way.
Right. But how quick do those white tears dry up, though?
Well, I tell you what, guys, first of all, I think it's great that you were able to voice I could feel the frustration coming from all of you. And, all I can do is give you the forum, which is what we'd like to do here. It's the next steps. It's the pressure on our elected officials, if you will, that perhaps can make change. We'll send them copies of this video if we have to. I don't care. Change has to happen for our world to move forward, because moving backwards didn't look so good, let's just say, a week ago, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I always encourage, be the dope you want to smoke. We got to be the change we need to see, which means that we, like, you see how we're multi-state right now? We have so many people from different states. Just us as a collective to create ideas on what we need. Like, what does it really look like? We know social equity and we understand who created it and how it is a certain amount of propaganda, but we could use that to our advantage because it actually is a thing. And the people that are disenfranchised need to wake up their minds and say, look, I really need to concentrate on this. Anything can be done as long as you have a schedule to it.
Absolutely.
Michael, my counterpoint to that is we need to stop calling it social equity, period.
Thank you.
It's giving us an asterisk. Like, I go there, he has a successful business, but there's social equity though.
Right.
It is equity. We need equitable situations, business opportunities in every community. And cannabis is medicine. Cannabis is wellness. Cannabis is a cash crop. Like, cannabis is everything. We need to stop looking at it like it is the cannabis industry. This is industry. This is business, period.
Absolutely.
We need, right. I always say the cannabis industry is a three-legged stool. You have the business, the wellness, and the lifestyle, the community, the legacy, the illicit side.
And those aren't race, because none of that has to do with race.
Nothing. And it brings everybody together. If we don't have all three of those and we're living in a capitalist society, it's going to fail. Like my company, I just got off with my old CEO, Baker Technology. We went public. We were awesome because we were helping people grow, period. Helping small companies, large companies, helping them grow in the cannabis industry. We're the first to do online ordering, targeted text messaging, and digital loyalty. We went public in 2018. And the problem, my strike price is $5.25. Stock is trading right now at 37 cents. Yeah. The problem is we had these VC guys came in and they thought, oh yeah, the cannabis is cannabis. No, it's not. There's issues. You got to connect with the culture. You got to connect with all these people. And they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do the work. And what happened?
But that speaks in volumes to the individual.
I got a call yesterday. I need to move all this product off Blackbird. They're going out of business tomorrow. I was like, oh.
Wow. That's us.
Send it over. I know. The only other thing I would say on the side of the, given a platform, one thing just because of some of the national spotlight that my company has gotten, people call me all day. They're like, I'm in New York and I run a delivery business. What do I need to do? I'm in Alabama. What do I need to do? I'm in all these states. And I'm just like, you need to lobby. You need to take you and all your friends need to go to the Capitol and create social equity or create what you see as social equity or a fair playing field for you and your community to get involved with cannabis. And that's what I don't see necessarily happen. I'm from Tennessee. My brother's lived in Virginia for a long time. We're
VA.
Yeah, VA all
Virginia.
day. I love it. There's a lot of people in Virginia that want to.
Is it for lovers? That's what I want to know. Is Virginia for lovers, really? Because I keep hearing that, right? All right, look, guys.
If I may, real briefly, I'm sorry to keep jumping in, but they both said something very important when it comes to expression and representation, that we don't identify it as social equity anymore. It's equity, it's business, and that we lobby. And this is something that when I was communications director, that I made sure that our narrative was important, that we're not going over to Mr. Monopoly and saying, we are messed up and you made all of these boardwalks and we say, look, we're going to go on boardwalk, we're going to build a business and this is what it's going to look like and this is your turnover. That's how it works with business. I've ran companies. Anyway, doesn't even matter, but cannabis is beautiful for me because it allows me to do education, culinary, and advocacy at the same time. And it go for something that I've had generations of people just be disenfranchised from, So the empowerment is in the education and in the language that we use.
100% education before economics.
Hey, the three of you guys were
hold on to your thoughts because we need to take our top of the hour break. Jimmy, go ahead. Don't anybody go away.
Look at David, take the break. I love that. Yeah. Thank you guys all for showing up. And as always, you're welcome here anytime. But thanks. David's right. We are going to take our break and then we're going to bring in a whole new group. Don't go away.
Offline for a moment.
I want y'all to fight. I want to see y'all fight.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And as a sportscaster on TV and radio for 25 years, people always thought I was an expert on sports. They used to come up to me at bars and go, hey, sports guy, are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup or what? I didn't know then, and I don't know now. Just because I reported on sports and talked intelligently about my love for sports, I was not an expert. I was a talk show host, an anchor, a reporter. Sure enough, the same is true in the cannabis industry. Now, even though it's been around for thousands of years, research is just beginning. The difference, of course, is that there are no real experts in the cannabis space. However, we all believe that we're experts in our own field. For instance, we at Pro Cannabis Media have 75 years of combined experience in commercial media, buying, production, and strategic market planning. Now, we want to help you control your message. After all, you're probably considered an expert in your field, whether that's lighting or containers, law, interior design, or even security systems. We already have an expert in the insurance business for MRBs, that's marijuana-related businesses. Bill Perrier from Charles River Insurance is our expert. He's a member of our PCM Gold Club of experts, and he explains that one of the largest insurers in the world is now writing insurance for cannabis farmers.
Lloyd's of London, 325 years old, the standard bearer in the market, is with a company called Chesterfield Brokers that have launched this parametric insurance for crops.
Insurance is all about timing, and it's a shame we couldn't have got these programs up for the farmers and the other cannabis growers who've been really affected by those West Coast fires.
We also have an accountant for the cannabis space. He's a CPA, Rick Lamitte of Accounting Buds, and we rely on both of them for their expertise, and we showcase their expertise in our news and talk shows. In fact, we'll put them inside our original content, and we can talk to them. It's kind of like product placement. So show off your knowledge inside our content as we position your expertise in your field. And you do that by joining our Cannabis Gold Club of experts. That's where you get a chance to show our audience your expertise in your field. This group of entrepreneurs will serve as a referral network in order to generate leads for your business and, of course, build your expertise because it'll be shared during our weekly news and talk shows. So if you want to take advantage of our following and the original content we produce on a weekly basis, contact me, Jimmy Young, or our sales team today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young, in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 million in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro-cannabis story.
And I love pro-cannabis media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love pro-cannabis media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of the Healing Rose, and I love pro-cannabis media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at the Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro-Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro-Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I've totally lost control of this show. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, but I'm really happy to welcome in everybody who wants to be on this show into the Zoom room. We're calling it a Zoomgasm, but this show is actually Cannabis Chat Live. We do it every Friday from 4 to 6. In theory, it's the Green Rush with David Rabinovitz, who is back with us. David, good to see you. Thank you very much. Why don't you introduce the others in the room now, because the people that were here for a half an hour wanted to stay. We allowed them to stay. So introduce the newcomers to our cannabis forum today.
So I will in a moment. So as most of you who watch the show regularly know, we have our 4:30 to 5 segment, which is kind of like a warm up to really get everybody going. Then we have the hour long. The 4:30 to 5 segment today was great. And we asked all three of those guests if they can hang with us. And now we're just going to combine the whole group. And we've got 3 great guests to add in. And I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves. Amanda is a pro. She covers great stories out of Chicago, truly a broadcaster. I mean, a real professional, not like somebody like me that Jimmy just happened to find. Portia, very much into social equity. We have Grant Smith Ellis, and I need a little bit of assistance from everybody else today. I'm going to strike it up. Today is Grant's birthday. So a very quick happy birthday.
Oh. Happy birthday to you.
Born day, Grant.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Grant. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
There you go.
Grant is the newly appointed president of the Massachusetts Cannabis Reform Coalition, MassCan.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Grant. That's great.
Newly reformed. Newly reformed.
So, anyway,
I like it. I like it.
What we're talking about today is social equity.
Wait, you forgot one person. Introduce Portia too. She's the only one you didn't talk.
I thought I did. I'm sorry, Portia. Portia, out of Illinois, correct?
Currently.
And she's got her
in Oregon.
ties over there. So Portia is the co-chair of the Minority Access Committee for the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois. That's a mouthful. Social Equity Racial Justice Chair, and also active with the Oregon Retailers of Cannabis Association, and then owns Coffee Pot Dispensary.
Yes, got my little mug here. Coffee Pot.
I love it.
Now it says Coffee Pot. Wait a second. Coffee Pot isn't spelled that way.
It's like Paul. Like
so it's truly COUGHIE, right?
Yes.
I
like
love
his
that.
coffee, because it's coffee pot.
I love that.
I get it.
I love that.
Very
I love
creative, very good.
I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, go ahead, David. It's your hour, baby. David?
Rose.
Power cord?
Did he freeze?
Yeah, he's frozen.
Well,
power cord.
just when I was ready to throw it to him and take the rest of the hour off. Right?
Warm up.
Okay, let's start. I want to start with Amanda. Okay, just because David says she's a professional broadcaster. So I'm going to ask her to give us a little flavor for what is going on in the Illinois and specifically in the Chicago market when it comes to social equity, because I am reading that there have been a few issues. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I cover Illinois politics, and that also has turned into a pot story. And that's why I'm on your program, because I have been covering it. It has been just over a year since recreational weed's been legal in Illinois. And in some aspects, people would say that it has gone remarkably well. The expectation is that it didn't happen this year, but that by next year, weed sales will be more than for booze. And that, of course, is bringing in money to state coffers that Illinois really desperately needs and wants. But when it comes to such social equity, I actually had the opportunity to interview Portia previously. And the same day that I interviewed her, I interviewed another individual who is Portia will talk about, I think, having issues getting a license to do anything in Illinois' marijuana industry, be it cultivation, transportation, or of course, getting a dispensary license. And there were big promises made for social equity. I mean, that was really what you had Governor J.B. Pritzker and all of the politicians promising, that was the objective of going forward in making weed legal in Illinois. And instead, it is still an all-white male industry. The person that I interviewed the day that I first met Portia described it, and I really like this term, as a cluster jug. So there you go. That's a broadcast TV appropriate word to describe how things are going in Illinois when it comes to social equity. It is a cluster jug.
Oh boy, that's crazy. Portia, why don't you chime in here? Tell me I'm wrong here, but didn't I read that the governor did expunge like a whole bunch of records for cannabis offenses and they're ahead of schedule?
Yes. That's the only thing they're ahead of schedule on.
Okay.
And that's because it was automated.
Aha. So
press the button. I mean, you get a lot of stuff done.
What did you say, Michael? Michael said that in our last segment. He said push of the button. Like straight up,
the button.
They could do that for everybody.
It's meaningful to people, of course. Having a cleared record opens a world of opportunity up for people. That's the objective. That said, I think, Portia's right. That's sort of the easy stuff, particularly for him, and in Cook County, where the state's attorney has made efforts. In some cases, it is more than a push of a button. It is a lot of work. And there is a new entity that has been formed to help people to clear their records, because in cases it isn't automatic, you have to go through the courts. And so you can basically get a free attorney to work through the process of doing that. So that is a portion of the success, but really what is where we have the focus and the unfulfilled promises is on anybody being able to profit off of an industry, when the promise was that this will be trying to make people at least begin to be whole after a war on drugs that disproportionately impacted people of color.
And the other side to that is, in addition to not being able to profit, people have went into debt and still can't profit after they've put in money and time and paid for buildings. And then, like, for example, our team, we had a hold on a building in a certain city. Well, that city only has, so much space allocated for cannabis sales. Since this hold has happened, PharmaCann has came in and taken our spot, the spot that we wanted to use. So now we can't be in that city anymore. But had we got the license at the time, or at least had the opportunity, we could have possibly. We put up money. We had to let the building go. We're not getting that money back.
That bothers me unto itself.
The
Grant,
dominoes.
I want to get the birthday boy and Mr. President from MassCann in here, because I so enjoy Grant's comments. And first of all, congratulations on that. And tell us, you now have the floor, Grant, because you've got coast to coast people that you're hearing, a lot of people that are very upset about how this whole thing is being rolled out.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you all for the kind words. And I stopped recognizing my birthday at the age of 29. So, but anyway, what I wanted to dive into. So I'm from Massachusetts, and I've looked a little bit over the past few years as an advocate and a reporter at the nature of our social equity program. And what I found is that it's bifurcated. And what I mean by that is you have social equity status or economic empowerment status in Massachusetts. It gives you expedited priority on the state level when you're going to get your license. That's great. But there's another component, and I think Portia was just referencing it, of local licensing. And there's a substantial amount of local control in the process. And in Massachusetts, and I'm hearing it sounds like in Illinois as well, there is no mandate for those municipalities to take into consideration equity when giving out local permits. And what it leads to is big companies coming in, doing what they do, which is facilitating bribes for local officials, to put it bluntly, and then kicking to the curb the very people these programs were supposed to benefit. That has a knock-on effect that causes two problems. One, it incentivizes the companies who do become operational to then go to prohibitionist lawmakers like we saw in Massachusetts with Bill H4168 last year that we did kill in committee. And then they try to bring back the drug war because they know more police enforcement means more profits for them. So that's a huge issue, because that results in disproportionate enforcement. And then issue number two is that we have social equity companies that were promised a piece of the pie going bankrupt because local cities and towns are siding with big corporate cannabis over smaller companies. What does that mean? It means that the cannabis excise tax revenues that are coming in, whether it's in Illinois, Massachusetts, or wherever, need to go into an independently administered fund to give 0% interest grants or loans to equity companies to get them through the process so they don't have to rely on vulture capitalists or otherwise until the Safe Banking Act opens and when happens. And when the Safe Banking Act does happen, it's got to be implemented in such a way where the companies who were harmed by their lack of access to capital during the current process are the first in line to get those bank loans at favorable terms.
Yahoo.
Sad.
I agree.
Well said.
By the way, it's the first time the whole room's been silent.
Well
Good job,
said.
Grant.
That's because you told me to smoke, Jimmy.
Almost fell on my hammock just now, man.
We've got like a catch-22 though, guys, in this industry. It sounds more than anything else. I think we understand that there's been a wrong in how they've rolled this out. We understand that you're still in a capitalist society. So how do we listen to Grant and do exactly what he's saying? Because it sure made sense to everybody because nobody reacted to it.
The problem is capitalism itself, man. Like, you have a bunch of people that are wearing shorts to the football game. You're wearing your basketball shorts to the football game, and a lot of people are trying to instill a lot of socialist platforms into a capitalist institution, and it's not working. And you got to make a hybrid system overall, or you got to have one or the other. Like, it's always going to be like one person against the other, because capitalism, the whole point of capitalism is to make money.
If I may, because I think it's time for me to head out. I agree with you, and what it makes me think about is like with a computer and introducing a new program for a computer, you have to have a new language, and that language that everybody that uses that has to assimilate and understand that this is the process, and that's that. Like, means that us in our illicit background, we know what we need to take from that and bring to the forefront. We know what we got to let go of, things that we can't cry over spilt milk, and we're dealing with a very forgetful government. They remember when they need to, but they forget all of the things that they've done erroneously. So I say that to say this: it's a beautiful thing to be amongst y'all. I really appreciate having this opportunity to speak with y'all. I want to do it again, and I would love to create language with you guys, because we have enough span, like I said, over states right now. I'm in New York all the time, and we are in need of a collective that can
reach out, brother.
Yo, I got you.
Reach out.
I'm gonna put my information, and anybody that wants to get in touch with me also, SupremeGreenCuisine.com.
That's it.
I can't wait,
there
man.
goes St. Michael from Supreme Green
guys.
Cuisine out of New York.
Love you too, brother.
Truly love you guys. I appreciate you.
Thank you for those words. David is back. Now, David, I understand that you froze on us, and when you freeze, it means you go to the bottom of the Zoom table. Okay. So, but I'm going to give you the floor, because as soon as I turned it over to you, you froze, but you're back with us, right? Unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, that was called plugging the computer in, but the connection with the little power blocks in the wall, and the cord wasn't tight enough. So
And there.
boom, the power went down.
We've all been there. Been there. Go ahead, David.
You just roll with it, right?
Right.
Yep.
So we were having a great discussion, which we're going to continue on. And I asked what does social equity mean? But let's move past that. Like, what's going on in each one of your states? What's working well? What isn't working well? And if we had somebody from New Jersey here, right? Because they're on the cusp of getting their act together. What would you tell them they need to do to make social equity work?
Call on somebody, David. Go ahead.
Marie.
There you go.
All right. In my state, what's working, what's not working? Of course, I'm in California. So what works is that we actually have a long-standing historical, positive relationship with cannabis. Yeah, we've been trapping for a minute, bro. In 1996, we kind of created the framework, and we've been evolving that framework slowly and slowly. We broke a lot of things in our legislation. Our equity programs are still not funded. We have grants that literally were just awarded. Oakland, as I know it right now, is the only city that is given any sort of direct funding. They're very against directly writing a check to a human. They want to see your receipts and write your checks to pay back after you've already spent money, which once again, how is that going to help the people who are affected by this that do not have money? We are impoverished people, right? We can't go get bank loans. To this day, I've raised so much money, I've never been able to get a bank loan. It's not even possible. Like, it's one of those situations. I probably could now. I'm at the point now.
You out with that. Yeah, we gotta get you.
Everybody wants a personal guarantee. Everybody like all these little things that are very, very effective. But for California, I am impressed, of course, that we do put social equity so high. Most cities that are large, Sacramento, LA, from the top to the bottom, are trying to do something. Keyword try. Are we successful? No. Am I impressed? No. Making one track programs are not good. CEO only. Maybe I don't want to be the CEO. Maybe I want to be the CFO. Maybe I just want to have some sort of other opportunity in my business other than being the CEO in that business. So having a multi-track state, I believe Maine did that. And I always looked at that. That was really nice. Also, we can't even have multiple equity applicants on one permit. We can't break it up. We can't say, hey, do you want to partner, Rico? You can have, 25.5%. I'll take 25.5%. We'll get to our 51%. That way we can kind of have more control. It's very predatory. Everything in the city that I'm in, San Francisco, sadly, I know the only two sole proprietors in this city. Everybody else has taken money from some devil, and I am very concerned about their future. And no one even talks about the tax implications. Like, I'm 3 years in with a deal that I've done where I pay K1s and I understand my liabilities and my pro rata shares of pass-through LLCs and understanding these things. We are seeing debt, and we have not even seen a successful retail open that's profitable. All we see, kind of to Portia's point, is debt. LA is a key example. LA said, we are going to allow 800 people to apply. 800 people that have been impoverished, that took out equity loans on their houses, that borrowed money from their families. We're going to allow 800 to apply. We're going to have 1 million. Then we're going to allow 200 to come through. Then we're going to allow them to sue us because we're morons. And we'll give you another 100. And my friend, Kika Keith, is one of the people who did the work to sue the city. And she still owes the attorney. They are still in debt to the attorney they owe. So
Kika is the homie. Shout out to Kika.
Shout out, Kika.
Yes. So I'm in LA, and Portia, love you, sister. The same thing has happened here, and we've been waiting 3 years, and they're still not operating licenses. People like Kika, people like Sarah. Sarah was on my team and would really kicked us in the nuts to get us to launch a lot quicker. She's a social equity applicant, and she's not from the trap. She's not from the streets. She left corporate America, put her life savings into this, and still went broke. 3 years later, can't operate, and ended up going homeless. Why? Because Los Angeles is not the second biggest city in the US. Los Angeles is 88 cities smashed together. And if you're not incorporated, you don't have the same protections as everywhere else. You have different lab testing from Venice. Yeah, Venice and San Francisco are a block away. You have different rules in this city than you do in this city. LA is always going to be a shit show. You have 5 different zones, right? You have the Valley, you have West LA, you have downtown, you have it's like Central LA. You can put down, Central LA and South Bay. And then you have East LA. They don't talk to each other. They have different rules. And then you have all of unincorporated LA too. Nobody knows what's going on. So they opened themselves up for that from the beginning. So Kat Packer, she's a friend of mine. I'll take it easy on her rhetorically, but she didn't know what she was doing. And you had people running these programs. Lori Ajax, she just stepped down, head of the BCC. She's from big alcohol. This is not big alcohol. This is not big pharma. This is not big tobacco. Why don't you have kingpins, for lack of a better word? They should be running the program. You want to know how to make it as profitable as possible and make as much tax revenue as possible? Literally let the inmates run this asylum because it's ours. Stop trying to smash square pegs and round holes, because you guys don't get the industry. We get the industry, but we need the business know-how. You guys handle that shit, we handle our shit, and everybody eats. But nobody wants to do that.
To add to that point, Rico, I think of the analogy of hackers, like the NSA. Who do they go to? They go to the best hackers there are. They go to the people that are literally diving into their firewalls and just eating them alive, right? Because they understand the complexities of the market. And it's unreal to me that we are, legacy operators, whatever you want to call it, the people that were in the off-white market, gray market, we are not valued.
Right.
They literally look.
Right.
I remember the first company I ran, my partners who were straight just investment banking, venture capitalists were like, we don't really want a CEO that smokes weed, Marie. And I was like, so you don't want me to smoke weed? You want me to run a company and not smoke weed? I'm like, I can do more smoking a joint than you guys will ever comprehend. Like, it's just, it's not relatable. But the analogy to hackers is something I love going back to, because that is how we should be valued.
If I steal that, I'm going to put you in the footnotes, I promise.
Oh, no, I stole it from someone else. So shout out to that.
I will say this for Oregon. Oregon did do the one thing they did right was allowing the black market in.
Yes.
Because the Oregon didn't ask no questions. They were like, did you, it was like 6 pages long. Where'd you get your money from? It was 3 options. It was like personal, loan, inheritance. They ain't asked no questions about.
See, and here's where you got Oregon would have benefited from more business people helping out the people that were getting in easy, right? Because at one point, I was going up to Oregon and getting very, very cheap weed, $5 eighths.
Who was it?
That's what I'm saying. Like, it drove the market down to the point where nobody was making money off of it, right? So, just goes to my point. That's why I played both sides of it. I've been on the legal side and the illegal side, but that's where we are better served by letting those people take care of your expertise. And we need the medical side too. So we need the wellness side of the industry also to give us legitimacy on the world stage. I love that you're in Chicago. I lived in Chicago, and I'm so sorry I forgot the other woman's name on too. Like, I lived in Chicago 12 years of my life. Graduated from Northwestern as an athlete and ruptured my Achilles training for the NFL. I was selling weed in Wrigleyville to tourists to get by. But I was doing that because I was homeless. I had 3.2 GPA, top 10 university at the time, Northwestern, and 2 degrees, and I'm selling weed to get by, right? And all the time, I could have used weed as medicine. I was literally selling weed to support my opioid habit, straight up. And I was forced into this because I didn't know any better. And I left college with these 2 degrees and no job experience. Nobody wanted to hire me because I was a very big, intimidating black dude at the time, right? So I fell into the streets, and I learned a lot about that shit. And I love Chicago for all of that stuff. But at the same time, you don't have the history as California does. Why don't you listen to, right? Like with the social equity programs that keep on, I call them dominoes, that keep on falling one after the other. Listen to what happened here and what went wrong. Like, it broke my heart to see the social equity program go down the way it did in Illinois. Like,
and
straight up.
I can't say, I can speak for me. I have personally reached out to people that I know and said, hey, I know people in Oregon. I know people in California. Let's do a call.
Yeah.
Oh, we got this.
Yeah, they don't listen.
I mean, I was having conversations with certain legislators, and I'm saying words like MSO, and I'm saying like SOPs. They didn't even know what I was talking about. So explain to me how you're going to write a law, and you don't know what I mean when I say SOP.
So actually, that's a great point. How do we educate our legislators? How is it?
We become the legislators. We need to run for office.
And you know,
That's it.
what Oregon is presenting in their social equity law is a panel, essentially. But this one will have teeth. They will actually make the rules and guidelines, and they will do the policing, quote unquote, of the cannabis market. And in order to be on that panel, you cannot be a politician, number one. And you have to have experience in the cannabis industry. And they're also saying it's going to be like a certain number of minorities and then a certain number of non-minorities. So they're trying to make it so that it's actually people who don't have political ties and are coming from, quote unquote, the streets. At least
I love that.
It's a matter
of the things we're proposing. Is it going to happen? We'll see.
It goes to your question, though, Jimmy, and I think this whole conversation has been directly on point in so many ways, which is how does the conversation about cannabis translate into policy that doesn't just benefit MSOs, but actually benefits in particular equity applicants, but a fair market in general? And I want to dive into that, but I also wanted to make a note. This goes back, this tension between the centralized control that is a necessary consequence of large corporations dictating regulatory policy, right? The tension between that on one side and a fair market goes back to the debates between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. The same debates popped up again between J.D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, and Teddy Roosevelt post 1897 after the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed, but didn't have any teeth. And they popped up again in the 30s. It's this running theme of American life, and every new industry is defined by how the question is answered. Who impacts what legislators and regulators are hearing about the market? So that's, I think, the key insight to how to create a cannabis market that's fair. And that's the lesson I think that's come out of Massachusetts. Policies where the industry tried to dictate it resulted in centralization, profit-driven drug war enforcement. Policies that were driven by the grassroots community getting in the ear of lawmakers and regulators resulted in the delivery operator license, the expansion of medical caregivers, the expansion of the social equity program. That's the distinction, in my opinion.
Great.
Well, I like that, Grant. I feel like what we're doing right now is like this asteroid hurling at Earth, right? And instead of letting the physicists and the astronauts, like all these people, handle that problem that we're dealing with, they're giving it to a bunch of janitors, right? That's what's going on in the cannabis industry right now. You have all of the weed geniuses available. And instead, you're putting people in charge of everything from legislation to forming these corporations, these companies. You're letting a bunch of dunces go in there that don't know what the hell they're doing. But they do know how to play in the system.
Right.
Let them play in the system and let them be the systemic part of our industry. You want to play you want to swim in our pool? Cool, come on in. Like, everybody in the cannabis industry is very inviting. Like, come on in, but play your fucking position. We all eat. Like whenever you're in a cipher with a bunch of friends, like, everybody pass that shit around, right? There's enough for everybody to go around. But you have this greed being brought in here. We were self-regulated. Like, shout out to Marie. She said Prop 215 days, man. This is the 25th anniversary of Prop 215. The days of quasi-legality here in California. And you have geniuses that were built generation after generation, right? And these same people, they can't get licenses, like, at all. How stupid is that? You put the director of the BCC, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, like in charge of the entire state, and she's from Big Alcohol. There's no knock on her as a person, but you have all of these geniuses. Use those people and find out and ask questions, like find out what do these people need to flourish. We're all going to make money off of this, but instead you have this greed. We didn't have a vape crisis before. We didn't have the problem with pesticides and all that shit. Just 3.5 years ago, you get the cleanest, best weed, like up in Northern California, and nobody was forced to lab test. People lab tested out of their own interests. You know, I want to show you that my weed is clean. There's pride in that shit. But now you have the smartest trappers in the game taking dirty weed out of California and selling that shit elsewhere for tens of thousands of dollars. And people are shunning that. That is ingenuity. That is straight up ingenuity. These are your geniuses. They're going to continue to make money until you get it right, which is never. Right? And so we need to work with the corporations. We need their money. We need their structure, but they need to respect what was built before them, or they are all doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past.
That's right.
Portia, how big was your application? So you talked about how Oregon was so short and easy. You could operate very quickly. And I think part of the issue in Illinois is there was a lot of thought and intention put into the law and in the application process, but like too much in the sense that it is so hyper regulated, and the applications themselves required, you needed an attorney, you needed money, you needed all sorts of expertise without any sort of guarantee that you would profit from it. And now, again, this gets back to the issue in our state of the delay and the bigger problems that that's causing. You talked about losing your buildings and debt there, but I think also fractured relationships, loans that can't be paid back because there was an expectation that some way you would at least know whether you would be in the business of making money. And now it's still just more lawsuits and extra time. And it is high stakes. It is all about money. You do have some very big players. I think that there still is very much an interest from my sense of things, particularly in Illinois. I just got back from our state capitol covering the first Black Illinois House Speaker. The Black Caucus passed major legislation that deals with policing and getting rid of cash bond, banning chokeholds, criminal justice systems. They have a lot of power to do measures that put Black and brown people at the forefront. And yet it is just mired in legality. And this is tough stuff to legislate, because you can't necessarily legislate outcomes, or at least they didn't in this case. They did it wrong, and it's too late. You can't wipe the slate clean.
Did they consult, Amanda, did they consult with the actual people they put in jail? The quote unquote kingpins? Did they quote, like, how does this system work? How can we make it most efficient? How can we make it work for your underlings? Because you're going to be running this company. That's what they should have been doing.
And you know what they also need to do, which I think they need to do, is like, okay, if we're playing tennis, if you put me against Serena, I'm losing all day. Yeah. I'm never going to beat Serena Williams, ever. You can give me $2 million and another extra foot. I'm 5 feet tall. I am still never going to beat Serena Williams, right? So you know what? You need to go and let Serena play Venus. Give them their set of their licenses, and then have licenses set aside for non-MSOs. I mean, is that really that hard?
I actually have a good insight on that. So in Massachusetts, one interesting lesson we learned was that because there was no mandate for local cities and towns to have equity periods for their local licenses, they just did it on their own. So Cambridge, for example, where Harvard is, MIT, the most progressive city in Massachusetts, they created a 2-year period during which only equity applicants could get licenses. And it so upset a white-owned medical dispensary, Revolutionary Clinics, that they sued and lost 3 times in court. Then Boston said, well, let's try something different. We don't want to get sued. So Boston created an equity program, but the rollout is 1-to-1. So for every equity applicant that gets a local license, a non-equity applicant can get a license, and there's no exceptions, and it's actually working.
I think part of the issue in
That's
Illinois
very interesting.
with just the goals of social equity was, again, just the qualifications. And to me, I'm a journalist. I'm an expert without an opinion on what should or should not be done, nor the expertise in the industry, merely the expertise in the political side of things. And what went wrong was, I think, in trying to get enough support, perhaps, for this to pass, and trying to dot the I's, cross the T's, make people feel comfortable with it, because it was a cultural shift as well. They went overboard. And so when you wanted to have social equity as a priority, it instead elevated veterans' preference. And that is something that, I speak with a lot of those who are trying to get a foothold in the legal industry, trying to win a license, and say, like, with all due respect to those who have served the country, that wasn't supposed to be the point and the prerogative here.
Right.
And further, you could win points on the application for doing things like promising to hire individuals from disadvantaged communities, which is an entirely different thing than being an owner of it, of course.
Amanda, I think that, like, you should have a compassion program for folks like the veterans that are dealing with PTSD. But yeah, just like you said, all due respect, my business partner, I'm a military kid myself. I'm an Army brat. My business partner, USMC veteran, 6 years, intelligence specialist. And I have all due respect with all the veterans, but they were not targeted by the war on drugs. And and the problem is, like we were saying before, is there's no true definition of social equity. It's a buzzword. And when you have no true definition of this, you have no uniform interpretation of what it is and who it's supposed to benefit. And so everybody wants to, just like all these other bills that are being pushed through Congress, everybody wants to add, okay, but you're not taking care of the LGBTQ community. You're not taking care of the veteran community. Like, whatever happened to we did wrong. We arrested a bunch of people. We targeted neighborhoods that shouldn't have been targeted. This right here needs to focus on them. We need to fix that because that is the blaring issue. And you guys it looked good on paper, the social equity bill. It looked good on paper. The point system, something that nobody else is doing, but it fell right into the same trap that California did as well, because it was too broad. And we're not knocking out one problem at a time. We're trying to appease everybody. And it just goes back to, if you consult with the people and ask them what would work. These people have been operating through ups and downs, in and out of prison system. They find a new way to make money. They get out, find a new way to make money. Those are your masterminds in the industry. Like, get those people together with the lawmakers, and you're going to have something that works. And get the veterans together, because cannabis is medicine. Get the veterans together with the lawmakers. Do something for the veterans that works. But you can't lump everybody together and think that everybody has the same plight. And it just really broke my heart to see the program go down the way that it did in Chicago, because I thought it was going to be very successful.
Well, Amanda, to your point, and also to your point, Rico, they're trying to fix it. I try to give credit when credit is due. I'll pull your coattail when it needs to be pulled too. So what they are trying to do currently is they listened a little bit to the people. They didn't listen enough. So we got to talk to them again. And someone wants to talk to them in front of the governor's lawn on Monday. We'll see about that. But they are implementing a lottery 1B, where there is a point range. And if you are in the point range, you can be entered into the lottery for a license. So they added another 75 licenses. So there's 1A that has 75 licenses, and then 1B that has 75 licenses. That is more inclusive.
The bill that would allow for that didn't pass.
It did not pass, which is why I said we need to have another conversation. The first conversation didn't work. So we need to have a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth until they get it. But at least they're getting it. And unfortunately, all of that takes time, and time equals money. And that's becoming a pain point for so many people.
Are your
And
licenses vertically integrated?
they can be. So they're giving out 100 now. At this point, they did agree. Well, they'll probably end up giving out 150 dispensary licenses, and then 40 cultivation. That's going to be a problem too. We are not going to have enough weed. Long story short, we're not going to have enough weed because the craft grows can only, by law, can do 5,000 square feet. That's not going to be enough. I mean, just sheer numbers. It's not going to be enough, which is going to cause another inequity, which is going to be these small social equity mom and pop stores do not have the budgets to pay for $2,000 and $3,000 pounds. But as we all know, supply and demand. So when there's less supply, the cost is going to be higher, and they're going to weed out the mom and pops. They won't be able to afford it.
Right. There's supposed to be protection from, vertically integrated shops, that cultivators need to give and sell across the board, not just to their own, but to their own brands. But I think that's what Portia is getting at is the problem. You can, again, say one thing on paper, but then making it happen on a practical level when it's about cost is another matter entirely.
Yeah. Because we see it coming. I mean, if I would have actually given out the cultivation license before the dispensary licenses, because cultivation actually takes time. Like, it takes months for a plant to grow, just like a baby. You can't rush it. Well, you can, but then it gets really bad and ugly and it's not good weed. But, you can do, autoflower. No one wants that. So, do start to grow so that by the time the dispensaries are open, there's enough to meet the demand. And that's going to be a problem. I see it already. I mean, there's already a shortage right now today. So you add another 150 dispensaries, and then the craft grow licenses won't be out until after the dispensaries get their licenses. And then
those are small anyway.
Yeah, and then it's only 40 of them. So that's another set of problems that we need to be looking at now. We're not waiting until it happens, because we know it's going to happen.
David, I'm going to bring David in here for a second, because when it comes to numbers, he's the guy I go to, and he does analyze canopy size and demand and looks at Massachusetts figures and compares it with other states. David, is there a formula that has been established in legal cannabis states for exactly how much you can grow for a market that's growing?
I'm not sure if I'm following the question, Jimmy, but in general, Portia hit it on the head, right? When the market rolled out in Massachusetts a little over 2 years ago, the registered marijuana dispensaries, the medical players had worked. Let me back up. The voters approved marijuana by voter initiative in 2016 after the legislature wouldn't do anything. They didn't want to touch it, right? Portia, same thing what you're talking about. And what Amanda mentioned, the bills go forward, then they die. So the voters took it upon themselves, got it legalized. And then when it got legalized, then the legislators stepped in and said, well, we're going to change it around. We don't like the way you did this. Except when the legislators step in, now the lobbyists come around the legislators and start whispering in their ears. So the law that the people put in place, which was pretty fair and balanced, expanded. And now we had special lines. And one of the groups that had a lot of money, and so they had a lot of influence, were the existing operators. Right? Now it wasn't a bad thing that they were going to get priority in the licensing. Did they need it? Maybe not. They could have competed like everybody else. They would have been first to market no matter what, because they already had grow operations going. I mean, one of the things that amazed me is, and which is why we had so many problems in the state, is we let 2 stores open up just before Thanksgiving of 2018. And there was just a huge deluge of people. There were people who drove up to Massachusetts from Georgia to be here for this historic event. But if you don't have enough product, the market becomes constrained. Our prices in Massachusetts are 40 to 41% higher than they are in Colorado. Why? Because we're going really slow in the rollout. and we don't have enough product. And that's going to stay like that for probably another year or so. Not until and COVID's made it worse because we got a lot of people with provisional licenses, which our licensing scheme is you put in your application, you get a provisional license, which is kind of like saying, okay, you look pretty good, go set it up. And then when you get it set up, then you get a final license. And then when you get the final license, then you can bring the weed in, and then you get a authorization to commence operations. We've got oodles, piles of people who've got provisional licenses who probably run out of capital because the provisional license queue just doesn't seem to budge, which means we're going to be constrained in supply. You hit it on the head. I mean, there needs to be more supply, but then you got to balance that with what happens when it becomes, when you can ship it across state lines. This is the only industry that is absolutely local. You can't ship it over state lines. When the federal barriers come down, all of a sudden the prices throughout the country are going to moderate, right? They got tons of extra product out in Oregon. That's going to go all over the country once the regulators figure out how to allow it. But I agree with you. If you don't get the supply chain up and running first, then you run a really big risk. I mean, one of the things that I was going to make a comment on earlier is, to me, one of the biggest risks in this business with social equity is many social equity applicants have trouble raising capital. They're not coming out of families that have a lot of money, and they don't live in neighborhoods where they can tap their neighbors, their friends, the people at the country club, on the golf course, that type of thing. So one of the things I get very sensitive about is when social equity candidates raise local money from friends and family, I look at it like that money is way more important to oversee from a regulatory point of view. Because if those people lose their money, that's going to be a much harder hit than if somebody's uncle who is very wealthy loses 200 grand. Is it nice? No. But can they withstand the hit? Yes. Right? Versus somebody in the inner city who has raised money from family and friends, and they've gotten $20,000, $30,000 a person to come in. That $20,000 to $30,000 could mean a lot more to that family than $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 as somebody who's got money, right?
And David, you can't possibly be saying that there should be higher barriers because people have less access to capital. That worries me.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that there needs to be a method. There's got to be consideration. This is not a simple business, and it's not a simple business for a lot of reasons. But one of the issues is if you have a whole bunch of operators that are vertically integrated, they grow their own product, and that their stores are their number one priority. Now you got a lot of independent stores, and if you don't have independent supply chain, independent growers, independent product manufacturers, you run the risk of the stores going out of business. I mean, we're seeing that right now with our home delivery licenses being rolled out. We've got established operators that are putting a lot of undue pressure and making a lot of predatory deals with prospective home delivery operators who are all social equity, economic empowerment. And in some cases, the hint is, we have supply. And if you don't want to be without supply, you need to marry up with one of us. I mean, it is a very, very dirty business when you start to peel the cover back. It's a very bare knuckle business with what goes on. And one of the reasons is we don't have enough independent supply chain.
But isn't that the simple solution? It's obviously a very complex problem, but isn't the Cannabis Control Commission, in particular Massachusetts, put an emphasis on how intent they are on serving as a buttress against monopolies? Now, they haven't quite addressed what happens when the market gets oversaturated, but they clearly want to protect monopolies. So I see it as a simple solution. Approve more cultivation licenses that are not tied to other businesses. Will they do it? I don't know. 25 final licenses at yesterday's hearing, though, which was good for them.
Yep.
Hey, a question about home grow for a second, and we've only got about a minute to go. In Massachusetts, they allow you to grow 6 plants per adult in a double dwelling, so you can have as much as 12 plants if it's 2 people in the house. A lot of states are not allowing home grow, and what effect might this have moving forward? Or is that an option perhaps to give licenses for home grow or even just expanded grow to some economic empowerment applicants? I'm throwing it out there if I'm making any sense.
I'll quickly say, I don't think home grow will ever be licensed. It goes against the spirit of what it is. But what I will say is Hopefully, Massachusetts' recent decision to expand medical home grow will lead other states to consider home grow. For example, Virginia just rolled out a proposal for home grow plants. Hopefully, Cuomo hears the people and adds home grow to New York. Hopefully, same thing in New Jersey. The problem is industry doesn't like home grow, takes away from their profits. The reality, though, is that in Massachusetts, they just expanded home grow. Medical patients can now have 24 plants instead of the 12 for adult use. That's what states got to look to.
That's what I think. That makes sense.
I'll say Oregon has home grow, 4 plants per adult or per home.
4.
And what I found, even as a dispensary owner, is even those that grow at home, they get tired of their own stuff. 1, so they still come to the dispensary. Number 2, many of them are horrible growers, and they're like, my stuff sucks, and so they still end up coming to the dispensary. They're not making vape pens. They're doing edibles, but they're doing too much, and then they're being hungover for 2 days, and they're scared to eat edibles again, so they come back to the dispensary. So it doesn't seem like it really hurts too much.
Right.
At least that's been my experience as a dispensary owner in Oregon.
Interesting. All right. Well, look, hey, I got to tell you, Marie, who we have her backdrop, but she's not with us. But Marie Montmarquet was great. Svint Mykel was great. Rico Lamitte, always a pleasure to talk with Rico. Portia, the birthday boy, and the new president, Grant. As always, we enjoy your presence here. And Amanda and Jesse. Just terrific stuff. Everybody contributed. Everybody had different opinions. They shared their own personal thing. This is exactly what I had envisioned for years, and now we finally make it work. I'm really excited. We have a very exciting announcement about Pro Cannabis Media, but we're not going to make it today, but I'm going to tease you. You'll hear about it soon. David, we should give a shout out to our favorite producer, Isabel Turner, because she coordinated this whole thing and did a great job. Dan French, who somehow or other.
You should give Isabel a raise.
Are you friends with her? I wish, by the way, I could give everybody a paycheck, let alone a raise. Okay. How's that? Like everybody else, we all need a little access to equity and funding and capital. Amanda, I definitely want to have a talk with you offline, as they say, because you may be the perfect person to add to our Weed Talk News correspondence crew. We've got them now scattered up and down the East Coast. We need to make some inroads to the Midwest and to the West Coast. So we'll talk about that. A reminder, like, share, and subscribe to Pro Cannabis Media's content. Please, we will be uploading. This is up on our YouTube channel. It's up on our Facebook page. We do repurpose this content and share it on our LinkedIn page Monday through Thursday. And on Fridays, we run our Weed Talk News. Now, coming up after this show is this week's Weed Talk News with my pal, Ry Russell from Weed Buds Radio up in the state of Maine. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, for our entire panel, thank you so much for watching. And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Oh, Mexico. It sounds so simple, I just gotta go. Now when you go, medical cannabis is legal. Finally. Trouble in the plains of South Dakota as their governor tries to stop the voters' wishes for adult use. And we hear from Captain Hooter on the thinning of the cafe industry in his beloved Amsterdam on Weed Talk News next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm your main man, Ry Russell from Weed Buds Radio.
Every week, Ry and I get together and share news items and opinions from the emerging cannabis industry. And Ry, you've got the lead story this week. Do you understand any Spanish?
Well, I know that Mexico welcomes a legal medical program, but as far as my Spanish goes, Jimmy, yo no hablo mucho español.
That means you don't understand too much Spanish?
6 years of Spanish, Jimmy. My advisor was very disappointed in me.
Well, it almost took 6 years for the country to come around, and it did take a very long time. In fact, more than 3 years just to get to this point. Amendments were made years ago to the General Health Law and Federal Criminal Code. And then it took another 180 days from there to implement changes. Guess what? They even missed that deadline. Next deadline, that was set up by their own Supreme Court on September 9th, and they needed another 70 days to get it done. But now it's official. The Mexican government will control and supervise the production of raw materials, molecular and pharmacological derivatives for scientific and industrial medical cannabis purposes. This opens the borders for exports of Mexican cannabis to European, South American, and yes, USA markets. Big time blow to the illegal market in Mexico, right?
It absolutely can be, Jimmy. And speaking of these numbers, let's start off our week with a report from the ArcView Group and BDS Analytics, where they expect that the global cannabis market could reach up to and surpass $42 billion by the year 2024. As we know, the coronavirus has not slowed down this industry. Rather, companies are getting staffed up and rapidly trying to meet consumer demand. Speaking of which, consumers are begging for more edibles. And as companies decide where to spend their innovation dollars this year, we need to review last year's top-selling products. And it seems to me, Jimmy, that manufacturers should be spending that time developing maybe some more discreet ways to consume cannabis. For more, let's go to Deb Borchardt with the Green Market Report.
Thanks, guys. According to data from Akerna, this Christmas holiday generated $427 million in cannabis sales. Now, typically the Friday before Christmas is the biggest sales day of the holidays, but this year Christmas was on a Friday. So it was the Wednesday before Christmas that got the most significant bump, with sales jumping 76%. This week, Cresco Labs said it was buying Florida-based Bluma Wellness in an all-stock deal valued at $213 million. Bluma operates the One Plant Florida chain and has 7 strategically located dispensaries with 8 more locations planned to open. Earnings are starting to roll in. Afria reported that its second quarter net revenue increased 33% to $160.5 million. Still, the company delivered a net loss of $120 million. Grow Generation released preliminary full year 2020 revenue of $192 million. That was an increase of 140%. The company also said its fourth quarter revenue rose 142% to $61.5 million. Now that's versus just $25 million for the fourth quarter of 2019. And that's it for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
Now let's talk about what's going on in South Dakota. If you've been following that state's cannabis reform initiative, you know that voters passed adult use and a medical program at the ballot box in November. Now their governor, Kristi Noem, is backing litigation that aims to overthrow the approval of the change to the state constitution about adult use of cannabis. She is not challenging the medical question that also passed at the ballot box. The medical question passed at 70% margin, the adult use at 54% margin. Needless to say, the state's NORML coordinator, Carly Wolf, is pretty upset. She said, quote, "These are cynical attempts to undermine the democratic process, asking judges to set aside the votes of over 1 million South Dakotans in a desperate attempt to override undisputed election outcomes." Unquote. I wonder where I've heard that before. Never in my life has the democratic process been questioned as much as we've seen over the past few months. And yes, cannabis is right in the middle of it. Right? South Dakota is not on either coast, but there is a debate on which coast will dominate the cannabis market, east or west.
Well, in a new piece by our friend Rosie Matteo for the Rolling Stone, she writes about how 2020 was an incredible year for the cannabis industry, and that we can expect the industry to start to mature much more rapidly now that federal legalization is expected. She talks about the importance of understanding the differences between what consumers expect in terms of branding and a feeling of connection from coast versus one coast. And brands need to penetrate this domino effect of legalization here on the East Coast. They may need to do a little bit more research to match the consumer that we have here that are demanding a little bit more transparency and maybe some more modern ways of communication. So Rosie makes some amazing points here when discussing the changing of consumer demographics and the need for businesses to stay clever. But it is interesting to watch as West Coast brands move east and as East Coast companies start to adopt more culture in terms of the cannabis industry.
So once again, Rye, the question remains, when will the federal government act on cannabis reform with a new administration set to take over next week? Michael Correa is the Director of Government Relations for the NCIA in Washington, D.C. We talked with him about this last week on the Green Rush Show that, of course, we live stream on Fridays on our social media outlets from 4 to 6. He explains that with this new Congress under Democrat control, there is an opportunity for a number of reforms to be instituted before the home run of full legalization.
It could be something like research or hemp or decriminalization as you work your way up to medical marijuana to full adult use. So on that scale, there's like low-hanging fruit and then the end goal of complete federal legalization, being the end goal. And what can we do to get up to that point? And so, yes, there's the easy stuff, which is let's just stop arresting people for this. Stop arresting people in this war on drugs so no one's lives are ruined because they're consuming a plant that's natural that 30 plus states have said, hey, we're okay with this. There shouldn't be these differences. So just stopping arresting these people and then worrying about what's the next step? What do we do next? What do we do to achieve some of these goals?
So one call from the executive branch to the Department of Justice could change the scheduling class of cannabis. And that would be a huge first step for this administration, right, Rye?
It would. But Jimmy, I'm ready for our main cannabis report.
I'm ready too.
All right. Well, your main man here, Rye Russell, and some interesting news. Proverde Laboratories was shut down due to operating without proper city permits or licensing. Cited in December, founder and chief scientist Christopher Hudala stated that he was unaware that the city of Portland requirements were different from the state. The lab will stay open and it has not laid off any employees, but will be unable to test THC-rich cannabis until further review. Interesting.
Interesting that I didn't realize that the Maine Medical Cannabis Program didn't already test for THC, CBD, contaminants, pesticides. I'm kind of shocked. I mean, isn't that the whole point of legalization, so that you know when you go to a medical dispensary, you know it's been tested? But I think this has been grandfathered from the caretaker program.
I think it does stem from the caregivers, Jimmy, and that is a great point that the chief scientist Hudala made, stating that this is a necessary part of the equation. We want our cannabis tested. And luckily, hopefully, Representative Patricia Hymanson introduced a bill that will hopefully pass that should clarify some of this, and it will bring a little bit more consistency between the adult use and the medical cannabis market here in Maine. And now let's head to Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast with our DC report. Phil?
Hi, Phil Adams here from Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the We Talk News DC report. The U.S. Census Bureau has announced it's planning to begin collecting marijuana tax revenue data from states where cannabis is legal. The Bureau currently collects state tax data as part of their quarterly economic reports published in the Federal Register. These reports measure economic activity across the country and highlight the extent to which different streams of revenue fill state and local coffers. The new plan will add tax data from cannabis sales and sports betting, which the Bureau said will, quote, modernize the survey's content to maintain the relevancy and sustainability of these data. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has announced it will begin making more grant money available to support the breeding, testing, and development of, quote, superior performing hemp varieties. Under the agency's Supplemental and Alternative Crops Grant Program, the USDA began funding improved efficacy in hemp cultivation in 2019 following passage of the 2018 Farm Bill. In this recent announcement, the USDA outlined plans to increase funding for this year's program from $50,000 to $125,000 per year for up to 4 years. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam has unveiled legislation to legalize adult use of cannabis in the Commonwealth. This comes less than 8 months after Northam signed a bill that decriminalized cannabis possession in Virginia. It also follows a similar bill introduced last week by State Delegate Steve Heretic to the Virginia General Assembly. The Northam bill would allow adults 21 and older to purchase and possess up to 1 ounce of cannabis and to cultivate up to 4 cannabis plants, including 2 mature plants, for personal use. The proposal would also impose a new 21% tax on cannabis sales on top of the state's existing 6% sales tax. Possession of quantities between 1 ounce and 5 pounds of cannabis would incur a civil penalty punishable by a $25 fine. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
In the state of New Hampshire, their Supreme Court said that consuming hallucinogenic mushrooms as part of a religious ceremony does not automatically disturb the public peace. And even though eating them is illegal, and therefore the act might be protected by the New Hampshire Constitution, the unanimous ruling on this means that it has to go back to the original court that ruled on this. And so we will see what they conclude, but the Supreme Court said it doesn't necessarily pass the balancing test between religious liberty and government interest. And so they're going to kick it back down, and we'll see what the outcome is.
Live free or die, baby. That's New Hampshire, right? That is New Hampshire. All right. It was 1 week ago that New Jersey legislators were poised to announce their new adult use cannabis laws when that deal fell apart over underage provisions. Governor Phil Murphy did say in his State of the State address this week that we are on the verge of passing a groundbreaking set of laws to reform our historically unjust approach to marijuana and cannabis. Our cannabis industry will promote the growth of new small businesses, many of which will be owned by women, minorities, and veterans. Well, now it's time to head north of the border to Canada for the Canadian Cannabis Report with Solomon Israel from MJ Biz Daily's International Bureau. Solomon?
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Canadian grower Organigram reported falling revenue for its first quarter. The company earned a net revenue of 19.3 million Canadian dollars, down about 5% from the previous quarter. CEO Greg Angle cited inconsistent inventory that led to missed sales opportunities, as well as falling international sales. Aphria also reported quarterly earnings this week. The company grew its net revenue by 10% over the previous quarter to 160.5 million Canadian dollars. Aphria is due to merge with competitor Tilray this year. And Aphria CEO Irwin Simon was the top paid cannabis CEO in Canada in 2019, according to a new analysis. His total compensation for the year was 18.4 million Canadian dollars. A number of other cannabis industry executives also made the list of Canada's 100 best paid CEOs for 2019. You can read all those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel for Marijuana Business Daily.
From Au Canada to Au Francois, the country of France is running an online questionnaire over the next month to better understand their public's opinion about cannabis. Right now, it is illegal to consume, possess, and sell cannabis for adult use recreationally in France. However, 1/4 of all adults consume weed in France, and 5 million use it at least once a month. So, Ryan, when I ask you what European country is the most friendly towards cannabis, what would you guess?
I would say it has to be the Netherlands, in that capital city of Amsterdam.
And you are correct for $0. Right now, anyway, in fact, for decades, the coffee houses in Amsterdam have been openly selling weed, and over 49 million tourists flock to that country every year to partake in that casual culture and approach to cannabis. Now the mayor of Amsterdam, Felke Helmsema, wants to close many of those coffee houses in order to have better control over its use. Now, when it comes to an opinion about the coffee houses in Amsterdam, I go straight to Captain Hooter, who literally wrote the definitive guide to those coffee houses a few years ago.
Literally, all of the dominoes are ready to fall over into the positive cannabis industry around the world. You are surrounded by countries that are either legal already or are legalizing soon. You just had Great Britain leave with the Brexit thing. Everybody's economy is in the toilet. So they're going to be forced to have to legalize or at least decriminalize in all of these countries. And this country decides that no, we're going to take our 40 years of amazing branding and wonderful experience that we've had bringing all these loyal people here, and we're just going to push them all away. It's one of the silliest things I've ever heard.
Captain Hooter should know he's visited and reviewed all 166 coffee houses and cafes when he lived in Amsterdam. His book is still the most comprehensive guide in the industry. He warns that the contraction of open cafes might be the first step for that government to take over the cannabis trade in the Netherlands.
As far as cutting down, I think they're stabbing the industry, the people that have been there and have suffered for years, decades. Remember one other thing that's kind of interesting about Amsterdam that a lot of people don't realize. It's not legal there. It's tolerated.
Right.
Tolerated. Remember, when I was living there, here I am, I'm 59 years old. I had to roll up a towel and stick it under my door. So when I smoked a joint, the smell didn't go out and my neighbor didn't smell it and call the police on me. Okay. So they still live in a very kind of I wouldn't say a police state, but I mean in this really regulated environment where the growers are still criminals until they bring the weed through the door. And then when it's through the door, then they're heroes. And, oh, this is this great grower. He grows this great bud. But when he's outside coming in there, he's a criminal. So the whole system has been messed up for a while. And it's been, talk about clamped down and held back. It's held back dramatically.
Well, it's just never easy in the cannabis world, is it, Rye?
No, but here's something to look forward to. If you happen to be a resident of Washington, D.C., the group DC Marijuana Justice, or DCMJ, has a great gift idea when COVID vaccinations finally arrive for the public. They have said that they will call for joints for jabs. DC home growers will lawfully distribute free bags of cannabis outside of vaccination centers as soon as that vaccine arrives.
Rye, you just can't make this stuff up. And that'll do it. For another edition of Weed Talk News, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Rye Russell, your main man from Weed Buds Radio.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.